Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Outside the Letterbox, episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about some film news, recent things we've recently watched, and then for our main topics, we're going to be talking about Scott Derrickson films, specifically his new trailer, Deliver Us from Evil, and then we're going to talk about just a little discussion about 12 Years a Slave and Gravity, and sort of the difference between those two big Oscar winners and their significance. So
They're both exactly the same movie.
yeah, so I guess we'll start off by talking about the Oscar results. It's kind of an outdated topic now, but I personally was not particularly surprised by anything. I was hoping Gravity would win, but I also understand why 12 Years a Slave won. What do you guys think?
Well, my money is on Gravity just because, as I said last time, I thought it was more accessible. But honestly, I wasn't surprised at all. 12 Years a Slave. As Ellen DeGeneres said during the show, either you all vote for 12 Years a Slave or you're all racist. So yeah.
Oh, and I mean, it's a really good movie besides that too. So it's not obviously that was a joke, but yeah.
I was still even when we were right to the last minute, I was still hoping Gravity could pull it off, but
yeah. But it still walked away with 7 awards. That's pretty awesome, including the director, which I think Alfonso Cuarón totally deserved, and I think we'd all agree with that. The only thing. I just have to mention too. I'm super stoked after seeing 12 Years a Slave. I'm super stoked that Lupita Nyong'o won Best Supporting Actress because I think she was awesome.
Oh, she was, yeah. She was even better in Non-Stop. I think that's her best role.
No, that's just got to be a thing. We just got to find a way to bring Non-Stop in the conversation every week.
I seriously think though, that she made that movie for me, in terms of her performance.
Non-Stop or 12 Years a Slave?
Both. No, 12 Years a Slave specifically. But anyway, the only other thing I was really surprised by was the best documentary feature. Now, I haven't seen any of them, but from everything I've heard, the only thing people were talking about was the act of killing, and I had heard mention of 20 Feet from Stardom, and then 20 Feet from Stardom somehow won. I was just a little surprised, I guess. So
I think it was funny actually because all of the best documentary nominees were on Netflix except for 20 Feet from Stardom. So I actually added them all to my queue with making a point to watch them all. And I only watched The Act of Killing, and then after that, I just decided no, I don't care about documentaries anymore. So I didn't watch the rest of them.
I think The Act of Killing. I think the problem it has is, my theory kind of goes out the window because they all voted for 12 Years a Slave, but it's kind of the thing that it's a hard watch. And I know a lot of people, there are rumors and reports that people vote for 12 Years a Slave without finishing it or without watching it because they thought it was an important picture. The same thing almost could have happened with the Act of Killing, except maybe people didn't think it was as important. But at the same, they decided not to watch it or go for it because they thought it was too violent or whatever.
Yeah. For me, the problem with The Act of Killing wasn't that it was too violent. It was just, I don't know. It's just kind of a bizarre movie in general. I couldn't really get into it. Once you had the guy in the dress singing about how he loves killing people, I was just like, what is going on here? So, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess I just thought that would be part of the point of the film but is it the way it's put together that's weird too, or is it just what's going on that's odd?
It's honestly for a good chunk of the movie, I felt like a mockumentary, as in it wasn't a straight up documentary, but it's a movie that's trying to get a documentary vibe. It's just I don't know. It's just kind of strangely put together. In the end, it kind of all comes together. There's one moment towards the end that I felt really made the movie, but for the most part, it's just kind of strange. I just couldn't get into it. The subject matter is somewhat interesting, but it wasn't enough to really engage me, honestly.
Cool. Okay. Do we have anything else to say about that?
Nope.
I thought in terms of the Oscar ceremony itself, I thought it was actually the best one in a long time. I thought it was really well put together.
I guess I'd agree. I didn't get to watch all of it. I was actually working while it was going on, and it was on the TV at work. But I guess like I thought Ellen DeGeneres did a really good job. Just overall, it was sort of bland. I did like. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I did like how she managed to make the actors and the award winners feel more like human as opposed to just celebrity.
Yeah,
Even the stunt selfie thing I thought was pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny actually is Nick, it's interesting that you felt like that because I actually this is I'm like this wasn't a bad Oscars, but it wasn't. I mean, like out of like the past like few years, I have to say it's probably my least favorite. I mean, it's kind of like
All right.
I mean, like it was fine. Ellen did a fine job. It's fine. I just kind of felt like some of her bits worked for like the first like minute, and then I kind of felt like they went on a little bit too long, and I just miss kind of some of the I don't want to say grandness, but I was kind of missing some of the the sketches and some of the musical numbers that they used to do. It's kind of like if there was some
missing
way,
the opening musical number.
yeah. I mean, like if there's some way to kind of take Seth MacFarlane's kind of the way he presents the Oscars and kind of that fun nature to it, but take out kind of the Seth MacFarlane-iest of it. I think that would be the kind of the perfect Oscars right there. I was really hoping that
I can see that.
song dance number.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our next news topic, which I think actually Nick put in here. I don't really want to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it anyway. The Transformers 4 Age of Extinction trailer.
So the main reason I want to talk about this is so I can pimp out a fake Twitter account. So in the trailer, Mark Wahlberg. I've noticed something about Mark Wahlberg, and it's been happening ever since the Happening, which is Mark Wahlberg's performances. I feel like he's got this innocent, real like boyish quality to him that's like really easy to make fun of. Like you kind of see it in Pain and Gain where he's kind of playing an idiot. Same thing in The Happening, and he kind of has that attitude in the Transformers 4 trailer. And so someone decided to make a fake Twitter with his of his Transformers character. So if you look up at Cade Yeager, which is already a ridiculous name for a movie character, but it's got some pretty priceless stuff up there. Otherwise, Dinobots look awesome. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. So check out that Twitter.
I want to see that Twitter character interact with Michael Haneke's Twitter character.
That's a totally ridiculous name. As to the actual trailer, though, I mean, it looks like another Transformers movie. I can't say I'm interested to see what the other characters are like and what if they can bring some more, I guess, some more heart to it, or at least the amount of heart that first movie had.
Yeah, the first one's easily the best.
But overall, I'm not that enthused, even to see. I mean, the Dinobots look awesome, but I'm still not that enthused to see another Transformers movie.
I think you guys already know kind of my feelings toward Transformers movies in general. For me, it's like every trailer looks awesome, and I'm always extremely disappointed by the movies. I have not liked one of the Transformers movies so far, so. This one looks cool. I mean, but yeah, the Into Dark of the Moonness looked cool too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that's kind of it for our film news. There's a bunch of other film news. I don't really like talking about all of it because some of it is just like gossipy, and most of it goes around like comic book stuff, which I'm getting incredibly sick of. I don't know about you guys, but
guys, we're getting a Dredd sequel. To hear Carl Urban talking about it.
Yeah, he said like one sentence. That would be awesome. I love Dredd, but he said like one sentence, and the world is like, or at least the film news world is in an uproar about it. But anyway, there's another bit of film news. Just real quick, the Sin City 2 released a trailer, and we're going to talk about that in the sense of how, specifically 300 Rise of an Empire, which came out this weekend, and Sin City, since their sequels are so far detached from their original films, if they sort of lose their appeal. It's funny because I feel like they don't, because they're movies that there aren't there aren't that many others like them. But with 300 Rise of an Empire and Sin City, the only way I see them losing their appeal a little bit is just because some of the effects that they use almost to make the movies look the same start feeling outdated. Which is crazy because Sin City still looks awesome, but then you look at Sin City 2, and for some reason it just feels like, oh, we've already seen this with like Sin City and The Spirit, dear Lord.
And Nebraska.
Yeah, in Nebraska. No.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Just because, like, those movies, 300 and the original Sin City, really represent, what is it, like 2005 to 2007 or whatever, that era in filmmaking, especially when the digital technology was becoming such a big thing. And to me, it just feels like a product of yesterday, and it's so weird both these movies were hugely successful when they came out, and the fact that it's taken like 7-8 years for each of them to get a sequel, I don't know, it just kind of feels like it's cool, but I like each of those trailers. Like, I enjoyed Sin City when I watched it. It's been a long time since I've seen it. And 300, I enjoyed, but I could care less if I wind up seeing the sequels, which I think it's just, I feel like there's a weird disconnect there.
Yeah, well, it's one interesting correlation the two of them have also, and more so for Sin City than 300. But they're both brought back by directors who, since the original films come out, have kind of gone through a lot of changes. Like, for instance, Zack Snyder, he didn't technically direct the new 300, but his fingerprints all over it. But it's kind of like, since he did 300, he's kind of done, he did Man of Steel, Sucker Punch, he's kind of done his own thing. He's going on to do kind of different things since then. If you remember when 300 first came out, he'd done before that Dawn of the Dead, which is a ridiculously different kind of movie. But then like again, like Robert Rodriguez as well, since he did the first Sin City, he's gone on to do kind of more ridiculous stuff. I don't know if you guys seen Machete Kills or the new Spy Kids movies, but it almost feels like he's kind of taking his crazy kind of style and just made it incredibly slapstick and almost a parody of itself. So it's be interesting to see what he does with the new one.
That seems to be this seems to be like a common problem with directors who have a lot of style. You know what I mean? Who are very almost flamboyant in their style. They do these movies that they're somewhat restricted by, whether it's by budget or whoever's going to be distributing them. I don't know that Robert Rodriguez is so much because it's his production company, I believe. But then they get success and they have more money and they have more ability to do things and they get more freedom, and then everyone starts to realize, oh, maybe we don't like this director as much as we thought, just because it starts to get all crazy when they don't have. My biggest example is Peter Jackson. I think, Joe, you love Peter Jackson regardless, but I know a lot of people who, and I think we all know a lot of people who say Peter Jackson is their favorite director, but they've never seen Dead Alive and the new Hobbit movies. The new Hobbit movies, I think, are more. There's a lot more Dead Alive in there than the Lord of the Rings ever had, simply because Peter Jackson has more freedom.
Yeah, which, quite honestly, is what I love about the Hobbit movies. I love the Peter Jackson-isness of them.
I think it hurts those movies so much, but anyway, I think the Hobbit movies are an exercise in Peter Jackson self-indulgence,
which I don't mind.
I think so. Joe, you actually saw the 300 sequel, right?
I did, yes.
So maybe you can, because another thing that is kind of my problem with the 300 sequel is, and when 300 first came out, I think a lot of people in it were unknowns, like Michael Fassbender's in it, Gerard Butler, but it's so hard to look at that movie and not see all the stars in it. And looking at the new one, it just kind of looks like they substituted, blank-faced, whoever you want, lead guy, and the only interesting aspect of it was, I can't remember the actress's name, but she plays the lead villainess. Eva Green, yeah. And so she seems to be the stand-up thing in the movie.
She has.
But hold on 1 second. Those actors that you mentioned for the first 300 were not stars. Before.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's hard to look back. I saw the first 300 about a year or two after it came out, and Gerard Butler was already huge, and David Wenham was from Lord of the Rings and stuff. So it's hard to look at that movie now, because everyone's so famous, and then looking at this one, it just kind of looks like they did a second-rate substitute.
Well, that's that's going to be the big difference for those actors' careers. I think, other than Eva Green, who has had a fairly successful acting career, is that while those actors might be looking at this as an opportunity to like make it big, like Gerard Butler, the difference is that that movie was like an original, one of a kind experience at the time, and everyone's going to look at this and be like, oh yeah, it's okay, but it's not as good as the original, and
Yeah, well, it's interesting watching the new one after seeing the original. One of the biggest differences I've noticed is that I almost want to say that the original one is almost kind of like a violent visual poetry in a way. Like, it's not your standard narrative film. It's very much the focus of the movie is on the style. The way they make it is almost like the scenes almost look symbolic rather than literal. Just kind of the way they're shot. They look all. I don't know with the slow motion, with the narration, all that kind of stuff. This new one is more of a straightforward film in the way they tell the story. I mean, like, there's less narration. The people talk more like normal people in this one. They throw jokes around and that kind of stuff. It feels like it's trying to play it safer. It's kind of like the original one felt like it was trying to do something new. This one feels like it's trying to conform to what all other films look and feel like these days, while still being a 300 movie with the slow motion and the blood and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I guess
look cool too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. I guess I just feel like we've seen so many movies that have taken from that. Like, for example, what was it? The Immortals. Which I don't know if it's actually taken from that, but I think a lot of the style of that was The Immortals, Hercules. Like, there's just movies that come out now that are specifically meant to be like, oh, this is like 300, or not so much Sin City, because I'm not even sure how they do a lot of that, but with 300, there's a lot of stylized action movies that come out that are like, look at how slow motion we can get.
Yeah.
and it's just so common now that I feel like it seems to be doing pretty well at the box office, considering, but it's hard to get excited about it when there's so many of these now.
Yeah. Well, one of the other big differences I noticed between this one and the other one is that, okay, so the original 300 had a lot of the CGI blood flying everywhere, and it was kind of exploitative in how gratuitous it was. This, but like, at the same time, it kind of felt like it was just more of a style thing, just kind of like the way the battle scenes were shot, and the slow motion really kind of used it as a I don't know, just like a hyper stylized, just kind of way of shooting it. Whereas in this one, it feels like the only reason they're doing that is because they're like, well, it's a 300 movie, so everybody's expecting this, and so they throw a lot of that in there. But they make it more graphic or gruesome in a way. And it's kind of like they feel like, well, we've all seen the original one, we all know how bloody that one is. Let's try to one up that by making this one as gruesome as we can. Honestly, it's a real turnoff for this one.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to that, but I probably won't see it, at least not until it shows up on Netflix or something, but I'm not terribly excited about it. I am more excited about Sin City 2, for sure. Like, I feel like we've seen less things like Sin City. And the first one was very, very interesting. So anyway, I think we're going to move on from there to, if you guys are all right with that.
Yeah, I'm cool.
Joe?
No.
Okay. And we're going to move on to recent watches. We're going to start with Joe. Joe, I know 300 was one of yours. I don't know that we need to talk about that again.
So 300, it's an interesting movie.
So yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. So in addition to 300, I saw another movie that opened up this past weekend, Mr. Peabody and Sherman. And it's fun. It's cute. I haven't read a whole lot of reviews or anything. Actually, I haven't read any reviews or anything like that about it. But I've heard it's getting fairly negative word of mouth. Am I right in that? Have you guys read anything up on it yet?
I saw positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and I honestly think the first two trailers I thought stunk, but all the TV spots and little like clips they've released have been hilarious to me.
Yeah.
So That's all I
It's
know.
pretty much the same thing. It seems like it's been kind of mixed, but maybe more towards the positive end. And I don't know if that's just a perception thing or what.
Okay, yeah. It was kind of like for me personally, I saw one trailer long ago, like when the first teaser was released. I thought it looked great. Ever since then, I've been turned off to all the trailers. I just think it looks kind of juvenile, not really funny juvenile. You know, just kind of a bland. Oh, here's another CGI movie filled with pop culture references, sort of thing. Actually, watching it though, it's quite a bit of fun. It's very cartoony, very slapstick. It's kind of what you expect from a Peabody and Sherman movie. I haven't watched any of the original cartoons, but you know, knowing nothing about it, it's exactly what I expected. It was just kind of the jumping back in time and the boy and the dog and making puns and jokes and all that kind of stuff.
Actually, I'm kind of glad that you brought the pun thing because that was a huge. Because I used to grow up watching Rocky and Bullwinkle, and Peabody and Sherman was always attached to it as a little like short thing, and the puns were actually always, that was kind of always how they closed it out. So it's interesting to hear that, you know, that they kept that.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's almost like a running joke about Peabody will make some historical pun, and then Sherman will be like, I don't get it, or something like that. You know, it's like a running thing throughout the movie.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that just from what I've seen of it, the funniest things to me, and this might be very juvenile of me, but is just the when he's he's making him a peanut butter sandwich, and they taste the peanut butter, and then he like a dog just starts like smacking his lips, and then it like cuts to like later that night, and he's still doing it. That was just I just thought that was hilarious. And then the ball thing when he's like reprimanding Sherman, and then Sherman throws the ball and he gets distracted. I don't know why that stuff is funny to me, but anyway, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say one of the most distracting things about the movie to me, and one of the only real negatives I have about it is you get pulled out of it, and I hate saying this, but you're constantly reminded that it's a DreamWorks movie, but not like the good kind of DreamWorks movie every once in a while, because like for the most part it's a fairly clean movie. Then every once in a while they'll throw in some adult joke in there that kids aren't gonna get, and or like some you know, poop joke or something like that. And it's like there's not enough of it to make it a bad movie, but there's enough in there that it pulls you out of it, and you're like, oh wait, that's right, it's one of those kind of movies. So it was just kind of distracting for me. But
That's it.
Definitely there's not like a whole lot of it in there. It's just the ones they have in there are very distracting.
I got an interesting kind of tangent off that. We don't have to talk about it too long, but it always seems like to me that DreamWorks animated movies, as opposed to like Disney or Pixar, are almost very disposable, with the exception of like How to Train Your Dragon or some of them. Like a lot of them just feel like they put it out, entertain the kids, and then it's on to the next thing. Especially when you go back and you realize that like the first DreamWorks animated movie was Prince of Egypt, and like they were actually trying to do something important with that movie, and now like I don't know, it's really interesting to kind of think of, you know, and look at kind of their business approach as opposed to what Disney and Pixar have tried to do. And that, I'm not saying that they've produced all bad movies. Like How to Train Your Dragon's great, Kung Fu Panda's great, even like the Shrek movies I still enjoy, but it's an interesting trend, you know.
Shrek is great. Have you guys seen Over the Hedge? I love Over the Hedge.
I love Over the Hedge too. That one's great. That came out a while ago, didn't it?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago. I don't really remember it, except Bruce Willis is the raccoon or whatever.
I forgot about that. I forgot he was in that movie.
And Steve Carell's the turtle or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to have a podcast where we specifically talk about animated movies and invite Ethan on, because he's looking at me with like daggers right now because I said I liked Over the Hedge and Shrek. So
dude, Over the Hedge.
No, I'm not kidding. We should do it sometime. But anyway, let's move on to the next thing, Joe.
Oh, so the only other thing I could think of off the top of my head that I've seen wasn't on in theaters. It was a Chinese action movie called Dragon. With the main reason it stands out is because it's with Donnie Yen. I don't remember what year that came out. Brian, what year did that come out?
It came out in 2011, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So Brian is over here. He says it came out in 2011. Donnie Yen, if you guys don't know, he was in the Ip Man movies, which are excellent kung fu movies. Just from. I mean, I might get this a totally different topic for a different podcast, but they're very. He's a guy that from all the movies that I've seen him in, Donnie Yen, he really makes you love his characters. He's really kind of down to earth, very straightforward, but he can kick so much ass with his kung fu and stuff. And it's just I don't know. It's very, very well shot, very entertaining movies. And his new one, Dragon, is more like a detective film of sorts, where he's supposedly like a hidden criminal, and this detective is trying to find out who he is, and so he has to do all these kung fu stuff, taking out bad guys while hiding it the whole time. So he's trying to make it look like he's beating the guys accidentally. It's a really interesting movie, though. So a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Nick, what have you watched recently?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it last week on the podcast, but I got the Criterion edition of Michael Mann's Thief. It was his first movie to be released in theaters. I think before that he had done a TV movie or something. It's really cool. I don't know if you guys are into Michael Mann that much, but when you watch this movie, it's kind of like the template for all his future films. A lot of focus on criminals. James Caan, the lead. It's a huge influence on Drive. Watch like a double feature of this and Drive would be awesome because they both have kind of that 80s neon color synth soundtrack. Tangerine Dream. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They did the soundtrack, and it's one of my favorite electronic soundtracks, probably next to the one for Blade Runner. It's a very cool movie, and I managed to go through most of the special features, and it's really interesting because in addition to being like a crime movie, it's about this guy basically trying to make a life for himself, get out of the business, and so he's always kind of trapped during the movie, and it was interesting to listen to Michael Mann talk about how the way he shot the movie was that you could never see the tops of buildings, and he was always trying to frame off the the edges of the frame with like lights or something like that, so it always felt like there was a ceiling to the city of Los Angeles. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of thing, especially on a rewatch, noticing that and how tight and almost claustrophobic the movie can be at times until the very end of the movie when he kind of gets into the big action sequence and it's kind of out in the open outside of someone's house. So it's worth it if you're into Michael Mann, if you're into James Caan, or just kind of like really cool 80s movies. Thief is definitely something I would recommend.
Are you into James Caan, Nick?
James Caan, yeah.
James Caan.
Say that again?
Never. Joe, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, Nick. So Nick, would you recommend this the same way that you recommend the movie like Drive? It sounded like you're kind of explaining. It sounds like a very similar sort of movie.
They are kind of similar. Hang on a sec.
we lost me.
They're very. So it's a very kind of quiet movie now. Drive is it's way there's way more dialogue in this than there is in Drive. Drive is a very I know it's one criticism a lot of people have is that Ryan Gosling basically never talks throughout the movie. But yeah, Thief I would say is very very much aesthetically it's very much similar, and it's kind of the same where in terms of there isn't a lot of violence in it, but when there is violence, it's kind of very explosive. People getting shot across the room and kind of blood squibs going everywhere and. Yeah, so I would definitely say if you like Drive, it would make a great double feature if you ever decide to do that.
We just lost a viewer, Nick.
Well, I still say the best movie like that is Only God Forgives.
Oh my gosh, shut up. No, movie. It sounds like it might even be easier to recommend than Drive if it's more like.
I actually think it is. I mean. As long as you can get into kind of like an 80s movie that's, made in the 80s and kind of, forgive everything that kind of comes along with that, I think, yeah, it probably is an easier recommendation than Drive.
Cool. Okay. You had something else?
Yeah, the next movie I watched was Lost Highway by David Lynch. I have never watched a David Lynch movie before. And... So the reason I actually watched this is because about 4 or 5 years ago, my older brother, when he was in art school, he had to take some cinema class, and for some reason his professor was huge into David Lynch, so he had him watch like 4 or 5 of his movies. And Lost Highway was the one my brother came out and was like, you should check it out. It's a really weird movie, but it's really kind of interesting. And that's kind of all I can say about it is that it's really mesmerizing. But I finished it and was kind of confused and didn't know what to think about it. It's a It's a really strange, like, psychological neo-noir. Bill Pullman is the lead, and it's really weird because halfway through the movie, he transforms into a younger man without any explanation. And then, yeah, it becomes almost a completely different movie.
That sounds
I wish I could say more about it. It's really weird. What's his name? Robert Blake is in it, and he plays a really creepy guy with just a white face. If you look up the trailer, like, that's the best part right there is Bill Pullman's interaction with this white-faced, mystery man. So a very weird introduction for me into David Lynch. I'm not sure where to go from here watching his movies. I don't know if you guys have watched any David Lynch, but...
You see, whenever I think of David Lynch films, the one that always comes to mind is Propulsion, which isn't a David Lynch movie. It's a Roman Polanski movie.
Yeah.
So I've seen bits and pieces of David Lynch movies. I haven't actually watched one all the way through. It's just kind of weird, bizarre.
The only one I've ever watched all the way through was Mulholland Drive.
I've heard a lot of weird things about that one.
Maybe I should rewatch it, because I think when I was like 16 or 17, and I had no idea what was going
There's
on.
one of his movies. I remember my brother sat me down. Was like, you just have to watch the beginning of this movie, and I think it was Inland Empire, but it's like the set of like a TV sitcom, but all the actors are wearing rabbit heads, and it's just really weird, and it just goes like that for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, but Twin Peaks is really good.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, does the first episode of Twin Peaks count?
Well, he was a producer, I think, on all of it, wasn't he?
I think so.
Or sorry, a writer. He wrote a lot of it.
Yeah.
That would surprise
This
me.
movie apparently, I don't know. David Lynch apparently says that Lost Highway takes place in the same universe as Twin Peaks.
Interesting.
I've never seen Twin Peaks, so I can't really verify that. But
alrighty. What else have you? You have one more.
And then the other movie I decided to go with is The Trouble with Harry, which is a Hitchcock movie. And right away, I could tell it's a very weird movie because it deals with a dead body, not necessarily a murder, although people think this body's been murdered. And it kind of goes around all these different people who think that they may have had a hand in killing this guy, but they're all surprisingly okay with it. It's a really weird, dark comedy, and no one freaks out, no one calls the police. They all just kind of like talk about it. They bury the body, they dig it back up again every time they decide to do something else different with it. So I kind of liked it for that, but at the same time, it was kind of this weird. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. I think the best thing I can say for it, and Paul will have an appreciation for this, is that it takes place in Vermont in the fall.
Oh,
so
nice.
it has that East Coast. It's like I'm watching the movie. It's the middle of winter here in California, but I can through the TV screen, I can totally feel those fall vibes.
Dude,
So.
that's like I'm sure Joe appreciates it too a little bit at least.
Yeah, I'm up in that Northwest.
But that's actually funny because there are movies that I specifically like just because they take place during fall in the
So it's one of those things where even if like the movie kind of had this weird tone to it, because in a lot of the movie takes place outside, so it's constantly there's that fall vibe, and I just really dug that. So
it's like one of the main reasons I like The Odd Life of Timothy Green.
Oh yeah,
Just because it takes place during fall. But okay. Anyway, we're gonna move on. My recent watches are all like I've been trying to catch up on Oscar nominations. So I watched 12 Years a Slave this week. I actually just went to see Gravity again in theaters last night, and I do not regret it. Third time.
In 3D?
Yeah, 3D.
Nice.
And one of George, one of my friends, hadn't seen it yet, so I wanted him to go see it before it was out of theaters, and he loved it too. So, and we're going to talk about 12 Years a Slave and Gravity in the next section, so I'm going to wait. And I started watching Blue Jasmine. I haven't finished it, but that seems at least like Cate Blanchett's really good in it. So
That's the only good thing Paul has to say about it.
well, I've seriously watched like 15 minutes of it. I have not gotten that far. So
It's okay.
Anyway, all right. So we're gonna move on to our sort of main topics, which we might talk for a little bit longer about. Depending on when Joe needs to leave. No, so first, Scott Derrickson, who directed, what did he direct? The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister.
And the Dave Earston Still remake.
That's one we'd like to forget. Although you love the original, and it would be hard for me to talk about how the original compares to the remake.
The original is one of my favorite films of all time. Actually, I love that movie.
Yeah. So, but anyway, they released a new trailer for his new movie, Deliver Us from Evil. They actually released two trailers: an international trailer and a U.S. trailer.
Domestic, yeah.
What did you guys think of those trailers?
I think they're awesome. I mean, I really love the domestic release trailer. It reminded me a lot of the trailer for The Conjuring because even though it starts off kind of like giving you the cuts and getting you to know the characters, it ends with just kind of a shortened version of what has to be a sequence from the movie, and just kind of, you know, milks that tension for all it's worth. And I think it pays off really well, especially for a first trailer. Yeah. I don't know what I think you get enough of what the movie is about. Like you kind of get that it's a police procedural, but with like the exorcism or demonic take on it. And I think that's interesting. I would like to, you know, I'm interested to find out more about that. But I think that scene in the bedroom just is terrifying.
You know, it was funny actually because watching the trailer for Deliver Us from Evil, obviously the last horror film we've seen Derrickson do was Sinister, which was a very I don't want to say it's like a shock movie, but it kind of has that kind of sort of horror to it, where you know things jump out, but it is genuinely like really scary, and it's kind of a I don't want to say gruesome, but it kind of is. I don't know. I'm not really defining my terms very well, but it's almost like a gruesome shock movie without being graphic, you know.
Yeah.
But then since then, we've had James Wan's come out of the woodworks a little more with The Conjuring and Insidious Chapter 2 last year. And watching the trailer for Deliver Us from Evil, all I can think of is, oh, Scott Derrickson's trying to do a James Wan movie, especially with the toys, you know, kind of moving around, the Jack in the Box making the noise. You know, think of the doll box from
that owl toy is freaky. Like
that's funny because I thought the noise it made was hilarious. Like I wanted that owl toy.
As soon as they cut to it, I knew he was going to do something with it, and it just terrified me.
So I'm actually really looking forward to this one because I feel like he's probably been, and like I don't know this for certain, but I feel like he's been really influenced by a lot by kind of some of the movies that came out, you know, the past couple of years, you know, or last year I guess since he did Sinister, and since I really like Sinister, I really like this guy's style. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is great too. I'd really like to see him do this kind of a ghost or a demonic movie as opposed to Sinister, which was more of a
movie.
Yeah. It's more of a shock and surprise movie. This one's more of a slow boiler. I'm kind of getting the feeling about.
So I love Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister. Sinister pretty much scarred me, and it's funny that you say he's trying to do a James Wan movie because I think that might be more a result of actually the trailer than anything else. Like Nick said, I think the trailer is very much like the Conjuring trailer, but Nick and I talked about this a little bit. In that trailer, there's like so much negative space. There's so many points in that trailer where something could pop out at you, and that is what I couldn't watch the trailer all the way through because I was terrified every single cut that something was going to pop out at me. And it's funny because I think that's what Scott Derrickson did really well in Sinister. I don't remember Exorcism of Emily Rose as well. I don't remember that movie even being that scary, more just being haunting. But with Sinister, every single shot, you're like waiting for something to pop out at you. That's what I felt in this trailer, and I'm really excited about it for that. It looks a little more graphic than, especially the international trailer. I liked the domestic trailer more than the international trailer, but it just looks like a little more graphic, which is if he uses it right, could be fine, but makes me just a little more tentative. But either way, I'm definitely excited for this movie. I gotta find someone to go with me because my girlfriend most certainly not after Sinister.
Yeah.
that lawnmower scene, man. That just
Oh man,
Everyone always talks about the lawnmower scene.
that's the craziest scene in the movie, man. Right there.
Yeah.
Sinister.
Two things going off of what you said, Paul. It's funny that you said that you don't really remember Emily Rose, or like you only just thought it was haunting, because in my head, if someone asked me what the scariest movie I've ever seen was, I would have to go with that because that's the one that kept me up late at night for like a week after I watched it. And I watched it like my first year of college. Like it wasn't like I was a little kid watching or whatever. And then especially like I watched The Exorcist, then right after that and slept like a baby. So like Emily Rose had a profound impact on me just in terms of like a mental scarring, which it seems like Sinister did for you guys. But then talking about the negative space and Sinister like that's what killed me during that movie. Like there are not actually a lot of scary scenes or a lot of, jump scenes or actual horror scenes in Sinister, but there's just a huge sense of dread throughout that entire movie.
yeah.
Exactly. It's funny what you guys were saying though about how terrifying the Deliver Us from Evil trailer was, because okay, the first time I watched the trailer was actually in theaters. Is when I went to go see 300 Rise of an Empire. It was one of the trailers playing before that, so I hadn't seen it before then. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't terribly scared by the trailer for Deliver Us from Evil, but I love the atmosphere, and I feel like it's a film that has great potential to frighten me. I mean, it's kind of like it got a jump out of me during that one kind of jump scare in the domestic trailer. Other than that, though, it's just kind of like it gives me more of the vibes that's going to be a great scary movie. I wasn't scared by the trailer itself, though, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, for whoever's listening or whoever will listen, that I just want to mention that Nick and I have very different experience with horror films than Joe. Nick and I both very much appreciate the Paranormal Activity series just for scaring the living daylights out of us, and Joe doesn't think they're scary at all.
They're boring.
And that I don't think Nick or I think the Paranormal Activity movies are that great of movies. We just like the fact that they managed to make us jump a lot.
So wait. So I'm going to interrupt real quick. I was just rewatching the trailer, and Joel McHale is apparently in the movie. I just paused the credits grabs at the end, and it lists Joel McHale as a part of the cast.
Interesting. I don't know why that's that important.
I just think it'll be interesting, just because my experience of Joel McHale is from, Community and The Soup, and it'll be interesting to see him in a horror movie, or what his part is. So.
Well, maybe he's the comic relief in the horror movie.
You never know.
Maybe he'll show up in the middle of the movie and start commenting about, like, YouTube videos or something.
It's going to be a wacky movie.
Exactly. But anyway, I think we're all pretty excited about this. I think we're all kind of Scott Derrickson fans.
Yeah.
His horror films, I think, for a lot of them, have tried to bring a bit more, like, I guess bring the themes a bit more forward while still being very scary and impactful.
Yeah.
As horror films, they still manage to have something going on in them that makes it a little like worth your while to be that scared. So
yeah. Hey, do you know what Scott Derrickson's next film should be after Deliver Us from Evil?
What?
Insidious Chapter 3.
Dude, that's something I want to mention actually. That you said he's trying to make a James Wan film, but something between James Wan and between Scott Derrickson, even in James Wan's most violent stuff like the Saw movies, I think that James Wan's movies always have felt a little more campy and fluffy to me than Scott Derrickson's.
I'd agree with that. I mean, like, I love Scott Derrickson's films. If I had to choose between the two of them, I'd say I'm more of a James Wan fan.
Well,
but,
of course you are.
Well, yeah. If only because he does kind of have that camp value. Like, for instance, I love both of the Insidious movies. I love Insidious Chapter 2 a lot more, even more than I love Insidious Part 1, just because it does give a very kind of 80s campy vibe to it. at the same time, they're genuinely frightening. The Conjuring, when I saw it in theaters with one of my roommates over here, Brian, we were freaking terrified throughout like that entire thing. That movie was just it was one of the scariest movies I've seen in theaters for a long time, I think. But at the same time, it was still fun and gave you a real kind of nostalgic tone to it as well.
Yeah, I saw The Conjuring with Nick actually, and Nick,
Yeah.
I liked The Conjuring a lot, but I did not think it was that scary. I thought Sinister was way scarier.
Sinister 1 or 2 or both?
Sinister, not Insidious.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I get this time.
I would even argue that even though it's a PG-13 horror movie and like the end isn't horror at all, Mama I almost think was slightly more horrifying than The Conjuring.
Yeah, Mama was really good. I mean, there's some parts in there that are kind of funny in a horror movie sort of way. The hair, I think specifically.
Yeah.
But I did really like Mama. It's funny.
Mama's pretty great.
Because I would say we're all like pretty big horror film fans, but I think we're all slightly different in our taste. Joe definitely leans more towards the campy horror films.
Yeah. Interesting thing about Mama actually is that I saw that one in theaters also. When I went to go see it though, it had been in theaters for like a few weeks. I saw it late at night. I was pretty much the only other person in the theater besides like one other guy. That's another one that it's very fun, but it's not. I mean, like it has scary moments, but I think overall the film kind of sacrifices terror for kind of this fantasy element that you see typical of Del Toro movies in general, even though it's not technically a Del Toro movie.
It's actually funny as one of my biggest scares in the movie in the past year wasn't technically for a horror movie. I remember when this had to have been like a year or two ago when Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy came out. I remember because Paul thought it was a really good movie and told me, hey, you got to go see it. So I remember I was getting out of work and the last showing before it left the theater was at like 10 o'clock at night. So I go to the theater and this is when The Woman in Black was coming out. And so I'm sitting in the theater and one of like the preview ads is like a reflection of like the movie theater and it like populates people and stuff like that. And all of a sudden it shows The Woman in Black like in the theater with you and it just like zooms in on her face and she screams at you. Oh my gosh. And I was all alone in the theater at 10 o'clock at night and I still had a 2.5-hour movie ahead of me and then I had to leave the theater and the theater was empty and I had to walk back to my apartment. It was too much.
Speaking of horror movie trailers, I mean, recent horror movie trailers that came out since we talked about Scott Derrickson and Deliver Us from Evil. What did you guys think of the trailer for Oculus?
Oh, it's funny because we talked about this a little bit. Don't you think it like showed too much?
I felt like honestly, I think the movie looks fantastic. I'm really excited for this one. I kind of get the feeling that halfway through the trailer they go more into the stuff about the dad and something about the dad being possessed. I almost felt like that is something that feels like it's from like the second half of the movie. That's kind of a surprise that they reveal later on. And so I felt like the trailer went too far. Whether it does or not, I have no idea. But it just felt like they showed too much of the plot. Honestly, surprises.
The only thing that I felt like they showed too much of, when you said that to me, I thought that the mirror shows you what it wants to show you, sort of thing. That little twist, I didn't need to know that to be interested in the movie already, you know?
Yeah,
and I don't think a lot of people did, and I think that would have been really cool to go into the movie and see like, oh shoot, like the whole the apple and the light bulb.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's messed up. Like, I kind of wish you had saved that for the movie. But,
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess I see what you mean, but I'm still very interested to see it. You know.
Oh yeah, same here. I think it looks great.
Yeah, Oculus.
Okay, I haven't watched the trailer yet, so I'll have to check it out when we're done here.
Yeah, it's is the actress's name Amy Pond, I believe, from Doctor Who.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she was, his companion or whatever. I don't watch Doctor Who, but I just know these things. Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, I know who she is. I just for some reason it never registered in my brain that was who that was. Huh.
And then there's the other actress that plays their mom is from She's from 24 and Battlestar Galactica, I believe. So,
Right.
Anyway, so this is going to move us into our last topic. Our last topic is so I watched 12 Years a Slave this week and Gravity, and I just sort of wanted to discuss. They were both big award winners, and I sort of wanted to discuss the difference between the two. And I'll kick that conversation off because I just have some thoughts on it. I guess having seen them both in the same week, 12 Years a Slave is a very good movie. And it's very profound and moving. I don't think it's fair to say that it's hard to watch because I think there are movies out there that are much more violent and much more, I guess, offensive on the senses. I could understand it, since this is a movie about things that actually happened, and that, that is a bit more, I guess, human and realistic than some other films that show that much violence. I could understand why people would have a problem with it, but I still think, The Passion of the Christ was harder to watch than 12 Years a Slave. And I do think it was a very well-made movie. I will say, though, that the character of Solomon Northup in the film, while compelling because he's a real person and he has a family, I never got a sense that I actually knew who that person was. I didn't really know anything about him except that what was happening to him, and I felt more like he was an in to see all these other things happen than an actual character that I cared about. Which sounds, obviously I cared about him because he's a human being and these are really inhumane things that are happening to him, but I couldn't tell you what, like, from the movie at least, what kind of a person Solomon Northup was supposed to be in the movie. And I don't know if you guys felt the same way. I just felt more like he was our way of seeing all these other atrocious things happen to other people and himself, as opposed to being a person that we cared about because he's, a loving father or because he's someone who is really in favor of justice. It's more just like, no, he's in a really crappy situation, wants to get out, and that's all we know about him.
It's funny what you mentioned about you not finding the film terribly hard to watch. Quite honestly, I found this movie a lot harder to watch than The Passion of the Christ. I think it's not because of the graphic content, because honestly, there isn't a lot in there. The thing that bothered me the most was the fact that these were people being treated as objects. It's kind of like, I've seen movies where there's been racism before and people have been treated as objects before. This one really hit it home that like they treat their slaves almost like, your car or your pet or it's your own property, and if the person's not doing it what you tell them to do, then they're just it's like a broken machine, and you hit it to fix it, or you trade it in for a new one or something like that.
I guess that's scary. I think I watch movies very differently from you, Joe, because whatever movie I'm watching, I tend to very much get into it. It can be a really bad movie, and like a horror movie, for example. When you watch a horror movie like Evil Dead, for example, you most likely laugh at a lot of it, right?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and some of that graphic violence, for me, I can't laugh at it. I cringe and turn away because, yeah, it's campy, but I understand what it's supposed to be representing. And I can't, just the way my brain works when I'm watching a movie, I can't escape that. And so when I was really nervous about watching 12 Years a Slave because I was like, man, what are they going to show me? And what they showed me was oh, this is powerful and moving and horrible, but it's not. I guess I guess I was just surprised, at how tasteful it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't exploit the violence. It's more digging into the actual characters,
right?
And being respectful to them.
It uses the violence in a really reasonable way where I'm not like this is getting out of hand. It's more like, oh, this is real and this is actually happening and this is horrible.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of the movie for me, honestly, was the scene where they leave him hanging, and there's that one long shot.
That's a really well done
crazy scene.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene was just the it's hard to say favorite. I guess I mean most powerful scene for me was
Yeah.
the whipping scene.
Yeah.
With
Well,
Lupita
Paul's favorite
Nyong'o.
scene is the whipping scene.
Right. So I guess I know what people mean when they say it's hard to watch, but I don't. It's not fair to say that, I think, because people sort of assume that like that means it has a lot of graphic stuff in it.
Yeah, I got some things to say off that, which is that when I saw it, it was me and then 3 other girls who were up in the front on the other side that I could see, and it was almost, if they hadn't been in there, I would have been okay watching the movie, but because there were other people in there, especially because they looked like they were only like a couple years younger than me, like just barely, not teenagers anymore, and it was weird to watch it with them. I don't know if it just felt like I could sense like they were uncomfortable with it, so it made me uncomfortable. I don't know. That was an interesting thing. But going off 2 things that you said earlier. One, the one negative that I've actually had with the movie, which is a minor thing, but I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, is that you never get a sense of time. Like the movie's called 12 Years a Slave, but other than seeing his kids all grown up at the end, there wasn't really anything that showed a difference to me.
Yeah.
Anyway. I don't know if you guys can...
No, I totally agree. Like he gets back at the end, and I'm like, wait, it feels like it's been like 3 years, and all of a sudden you have gray hair in this one scene.
And then going off what you said about how Solomon Northup, you don't know a lot about him, and he almost, kind of, it's almost to show like the other characters. I would agree with that because I think Lupita Nyong'o, I think is a really, that's the example of, I think, slavery that people are going to remember. And then the character to me that I thought a lot about coming out of the movie was actually Benedict Cumberbatch's character, because you can complain all you want about like the type of people that Michael Fassbender, the character that Michael Fassbender played, and how they were terrible and responsible for slavery. But almost Benedict Cumberbatch's character is almost worse, because you can tell he's a good man that's bought into the system and isn't willing to fight or stand up for it. And I think that's a problem that even outside of slavery that you just see in around the world. There's all these good people who aren't willing to actually do anything about it. So I thought that was an interesting thing that I got out of it.
So one thing, this is actually interesting because I've been just reading about. I haven't read the book, but I'd like to if I ever get a chance to read it. But there's some inaccuracies. Obviously, there always are when something is adapted. But one of the inaccuracies I thought was somewhat interesting and kind of odd was that in the book, apparently, the Mistress Epps asks Solomon Northup to kill Patsy, not Patsy asking Solomon Northup to kill herself.
Really?
Yeah, and that it's really interesting, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it's just something that I've read in a lot of forums and articles about it, that it seems to be a misreading of that excerpt that made it into the movie somehow.
Huh.
So I just thought that was really that just seemed kind of crazy to me, that they would make that kind of either a mistake or a change, because that's a pretty big character change,
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, like I haven't read the book yet. I really like to also. I'm not sure. Another question about the book I'm curious about is how much do they show of him before he was a slave as well? Because I know in the film, one thing that made the film really interesting to me was the fact that you see him kind of before he was a slave and he was a free man and all that kind of stuff, and then but they don't show a whole lot of it. They give you just enough to kind of give you an idea of who this guy is, what kind of life he lived, so that when he does become a slave, all of a sudden it just kind of hits you like, wow, this is a huge kind of a social shift for this guy, which is one thing that really kind of drew me into the movie. I've seen slave movies before, but this is the first one I felt like where you see it from a perspective of a guy who used to be who was free, then became a slave. I just don't know if I've ever really seen that before in a movie, Yeah.
I think it was a really great movie, and Yeah, I would strongly recommend most adults to see that movie, and a lot of high school students too. I would highly recommend it to them. And I feel like a lot of people would not recommend it to others just because it's so hard to watch. But again, I don't think that that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like some sort of a documentary, like a really well dramatized documentary, that was really tastefully done, as opposed to like, oh, there's a lot of graphic stuff in it, so you shouldn't watch it.
Yeah. One of my minor complaints about this movie, it was like a bigger one that I had when I first saw the movie, but it's not as big for me anymore, is there is a lot of the, I don't want to say white guilt in this movie, but like almost every white character you see in this movie is kind of portrayed as condoning the slavery and being okay with it, with the exception of, like, for instance, you have Benedict Cumberbatch, obviously, who, even though he's against it, he still kind of goes along with it because he doesn't want to get in trouble is what people are doing in the day. But then they have to throw in the one sympathetic white character who is Brad Pitt, like a 3/4 into the movie, which it's kind of like, as far as just kind of stereotypes, I felt like they had a lot of those stereotypes that you see in these kind of slavery and racism movies like that. It was done well enough, though, that it didn't distract me. It's just kind of a little thing that I noticed.
I guess
expecting to know a lot.
My response to that, Joe, is I think a lot of those stereotypes exist because of the book. Like those characters, apparently, like Brad Pitt's character and like Epps' character and all those. Michael Fassbender's character, those are all apparently depicted accurately, like very accurately, and apparently, like, Michael Fassbender's character in reality was actually worse than they showed him to be in the movie.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the Benedict Cumberbatch's character was apparently better than they showed him to be in the movie, and Brad Pitt was apparently just accurately portraying that guy. So it's funny that you say that, but I honestly do think that a lot of if we're looking at, I guess, more fictionalized stories where these sort of caricatures exist, that I think they exist because of that book and because of the history, not necessarily just because,
Right. Okay. That's really good to know. That's really interesting because I hadn't known that before.
But anyway, yeah, that's just what, at least from what I've read. I could be 100% wrong. But anyway, that just makes me want to move into just talking about, I guess, a comparison sort of between Gravity and 12 Years a Slave. I think we all love Gravity. I just saw it again, and for the third time, and I still love it. And I think it's interesting because I think 12 Years a Slave, I understand why 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture. I think it's, I guess, societally, I don't even know if that's a word, but in society, it's a more important movie. But as far as filmmaking goes, I think Gravity is definitely a more important film. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it definitely makes sense to me. Yeah.
And it's mainly just that Gravity is it's a really well made film. It's good in all regards. I think it's good in the story, it's good in its acting, and it's good technically. And I guess the difference between, because I was very much against Avatar winning Best Picture when it was nominated for Best Picture. I was like, no Avatar, let The Hurt Locker win or whatever. And the difference, I guess, being is that I think Avatar was amazing technically, but I really hate that story. And I hate that it's 2.5 hours long.
I feel exactly the same way. Avatar is. I always hate talking about Avatar because story-wise, it is a terrible, terrible movie. It's not a very good movie at all. I've watched it multiple times though, just for the visuals and the action scenes and kind of the sci-fi though.
Yeah, and I guess I just felt like Gravity was the first time I felt like we had seen a big VFX movie that was also somewhat of an art house film.
Yeah. I think Gravity is the movie that we'll look back on, and it'll define this past year more because, like, 12 Years a Slave, great movie, but it's also a movie that could have been made before. If someone had, dared to make that story. Gravity is a movie that couldn't have come out. even 2 or 3 years ago.
You know what? Yeah. You know what 12 Years a Slave needed to kind of push it over Gravity, just kind of in a technical standpoint, was it should have been in 3D with like coming at the camera and just letters in the camera and stuff.
That's horrible. No, so I guess that's just my thoughts on 12 Years a Slave and Gravity, sort of the two movies that were really in competition at the Oscars this year.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how big, or how much like American Hustle was allegedly in the race and then nominated for 10, Oscars and then wins nothing. Which I think helped the move. I think it helped American Hustle because now people won't unfairly judge the movie going forward. But
yeah, and I think American Hustle. I really like American Hustle, but with the movies that came out this past year, there was no reason for that to win.
I'm disappointed that it didn't win anything, quite honestly. It was a fine movie, but it got its recognition. It can go away now.
Yeah, so anyway, I think that pretty much concludes our podcast for the day. Nick, where can people follow you?
You can follow me at Shout92 on Twitter.
And Joe?
You can find me on Credo Films. That's CREDO Films on Twitter. And we have a Google Plus there, too, if anybody wants that at all.
Sweet. And you guys can find me at PFDuda, PFDUDA on Twitter. And it's just Paul Duda on Google Plus. And you can also check out our blog starting this Monday at the-letterbox.com. And that's hopefully going to be launching Monday. We'll have some cool articles up there for you guys. And
coming out.
What's that?
An interesting article about 300 coming out for those interested.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested to know Joe's perspective because I'm writing. It's a huge article. I'm not done with it yet, but it's a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. It's as of right now, it's a 5-page defense of the Lone Ranger. I think I might have to edit it down, but I've thought about that.
Okay, so that'll be very interesting to read for sure, and we'll probably get a chance to talk about some of these, but I know all of us are going to be participating in different columns, I guess you'd call them, or different series of articles where we do in defense of, or back and forth sort of about different movies that we feel strongly about. So you guys can check that out. Again, that's the-letterbox.com coming on Monday. And other than that, you can check us out next week for our next podcast. So,
all right, take it easy.
All right. I think we really need music. That's what we need to improve on for next time.
Music?
We should just have every week Joe sings a new theme song.
We can the spot. We can all chime in a cappella and do I don't know, Lord of the Rings theme or something. Anyway, I'm gonna go off. We're going off air now. Bye.
Bye.